Welcome to our Devos. This week we're talking about negative beliefs, broken things, broken thoughts that tend to find their way into the church, find their way into our personal lives. And today we're going to step up to the plate with yet another one. And this one, again, if you take my sayings out of context, which you could, one soundbite of this is going to cause you to have an uprising, and you shouldn't. Okay? But this is one that I've heard constantly, and I've heard it in different times from people that have talked about God and his judgment at times. And this is it. I will be judged for my sin. Now, from a Christian perspective, this is entirely incorrect. Now, hear me on this. Please hear me before we get into the why of this. As Christians, we are accountable to God for our lives. It's true. But I've heard Christians that have made mistakes say, "Oh, I'm going to be judged. Oh man, when I stand before God, God's going to punish me and for all the things I've done." And there's two things that you have to keep in mind about that. Number one, it's causing you to live life out of fear, this agonizing fear, as if Jesus isn't present in your life, okay? So this idea of like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, have I sinned so much? And I don't know. Okay, so it's causing you to live not in confidence. The second thing that this happens when you say, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, is you are taking the power of Jesus' crucifixion away from his ability to judge the world's sin through one act of redemptive righteousness. You're taking that power away and you're saying, okay, well, not only was sin judged at the cross, which it was, and that's where we're going with this. And this is a little bit heavy theologically, but try to follow me here. If we believe that in the moment that Jesus was crucified, the sins of the world were placed on him, and the judgment of God the Father came upon him for all sin, the sins that you've committed, the sins that you're committing, the sins that you will commit. If the judgment of God came down upon Christ and he became our propitiation from sin, as it says in 1 John. If all that is said and true, then why is someone who has believed in Jesus, who has trusted in Jesus, who has loved Jesus and said, okay, I believe in Jesus, I know who Jesus is, and Jesus has saved me in my soul. Why is that person now, when they get to the place of seeing God and meeting God in heaven, why are they judged again? The judgment of Christ absorbed our sin. And so where we get confused, and this is what it is, it's because we are confusing judgment with the rewards. Now, I don't have time to get into this because it's really heavy. But Pastor Mike, when he does this prophecy series, and he did a whole series on this a couple years back. It's worth looking up in our archives on rewards. What happens when a Christian dies is they are rewarded according to what we have done or not done while living on this earth. It's a reward thing. Okay, and those who have died without Christ, if you look at the end of the book of Revelation, there is something called the Great White Throne Judgment. Those are only for those who have not trusted in Jesus Christ. Those are those who have refused the grace of God and have now been sentenced to eternity, lost apart from God because of their lack of faith in God. I know it's all heavy and it all bears its own examination. But look with me really quickly in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10. Now this is referring to the first judgment, the judgment seat. This is only for Christians, only for Christians. He says, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. Now, when he's talking about this, he's referring to, later on, the rewards. He's referring to, and the word he uses for judgment seat is the word bema in the Greek, which the people at the time would have understood it to mean. It referred to sporting events that people would gather in, like the Colosseums, and this time in Roman culture. They would gather in these events and they would watch people compete in a race. Similar language used in Hebrews for this race. Remember, we all must run our race. Okay, remember this. And at the end, what would happen is they would be given awards based on their performance in the race. Now, you don't see any punishment going on in these things, but here's where we have to be careful. That doesn't mean that you live whatever way you want. It doesn't matter. I don't really care about rewards. No, according to the Bible, you should care because those rewards are a direct reflection of the way that you loved God and the way that you served his people. So if you're like, I don't really care about this, it's saying a lot about what you think of God. And the other thing to consider about this, when we think about the rewards portion, is there's not this judgment, but there is going to be what is spoken of, again, too much time to get into, a loss of reward for the sins we've committed, for the fact that we never resisted temptation, for the fact that we didn't love like Jesus told us to love. And that loss of reward is, in and of itself, going to be heartbreaking. So I want you to think about this as you think about your life. Don't cower in fear as a Christian because you're worried about your sin being judged. Instead, be emboldened to serve God more because you are rewarded for that and because God calls you to live the way that Jesus lived and loved.